Hey Pokemon Masters, Birdkeeper Toby here, and I've made it to the place where legends are still alive. Behind me, one of the many towers that inspired the towers of Ecruteak City. But did you know there are towers for legendary Pokemon elsewhere in the Pokemon world, specifically in Johto, in Goldenrod? You didn't know about that one, but there was, long before the radio tower stood there. It's a deep hidden bit of Pokemon lore, and it's one of my favorites. But before I get into that, I want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Whatnot, without whom I would not be able to check out this legendary location. More on them at the end of the video, but for now, let's talk about the hidden missing tower of the Johto region.
In Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver, there's a very important piece of dialogue given to you by the Radio Tower Director when you save him from Team Rocket. He brings to you, depending on the version of the game, the Silver, Rainbow Wing, or the Clear Bell. These are the summoning items for Ho-oh, Lugia, and of course Suicune. He mentions that this item was found in the Radio Tower back when it was just a dusty old tower, a different tower that used to stand there, ultimately destroyed and replaced with the Radio Tower of today. It's clear then what he's referring to is an old roosting spot for Ho-oh and Lugia that lived on the Goldenrod coast. Now, given the name Goldenrod, this might suggest a connection to Ho-oh. Ho-oh being a golden sun deity. This would make sense as well because the ruins of Alpha nearby that depict Ho-oh, but I don't think so. First of all, this coast lines up with the Whirl Islands, and I think would be better for a home for Lugia. But also, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It would make more sense if Ho-oh used to roost on a tower to the east of the region. And sure enough, in the east of the region, away from Ecruteak City, is Violet City, where another tower stands. The Sprout Tower. Now you might think, but hang on, they built this tower to Bellsprout, but that's not actually true. They simply observed Bellsprout's structure and the way that it moves its body, and decided that this would be a good structure to base a tall tower around. I like this especially because the gym leader is a bird keeper like myself, so having a Ho-oh as your patron deity would make a lot of sense. Still, there might be other options here. For the Tin and Brass Towers were created 700 years ago. The Radio Tower replaced whatever came before it, probably within the lifetime of the player characters much more recently, suggesting that other towers may have coexisted alongside the two from Ecruteak. We know that 500 years ago, the guardian deities of Alola fought against Solgaleo and Lunala. There are library entries in Marley City that talk about, as well, kings of the islands, which have been replaced, of course, in modern day with kahunas. Marley City is an interesting city. Nearby in here, we learn that people of Kanto and Johto came over on the backs of their Pokemon to create the city, and Johtonian culture can be seen all over the Alola region, including in the Marley City Garden, where a 5-tiered tower stands in the corner, replicating that we see in Ecruteak. So perhaps this golden tower is the kind of tower that used to exist in Johto. Maybe this is what the Tower of Goldenrod looked like before it was torn down and replaced with the Radio Tower, the Golden Tower, which again would indicate more towards Ho-oh than Lugia. There are other towers in the Pokemon world. The Tower of Darkness and Waters appear in the Isle of Armor, likely built and constructed based on those yet again seen in the Johto region. There's a whole theory about how Kubfu came from Sinnoh and Johto after training in the mountains that exist between those two regions. This is why Urshifu has Single and Rapid Strike, mimicking the battle styles of old Hisui. I do wonder, however, if the other Tower of Johto was actually in the Kanto region after all. At first, that might seem odd to you, except we know that while Ho-oh is the leader of the legendary beasts, Lugia is the master of the legendary birds, and this is not just anime exclusive. While we see this in the movie 2000, in Azure Bay in the Kalos region, there is the Sea Spirit's Den. The Sea Spirit is referring to Lugia, and this is where you'll find Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. In most games where Lugia and Ho-oh appear, the beasts appear alongside Ho-oh, and the birds will appear alongside Lugia. In the Crown Tundra, there are the Galarian forms of Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno, set on the Pokemon website to only migrate to the Galar region, suggesting they're from somewhere else. Uno, dos, tres in the name could suggest a connection to Paldea, but we don't have a huge amount of evidence for that. Still, it seems that Lugia has some connection here to the Crown Tundra, for the Sea Spirit's Den in Kalos is actually in the Pokemon world equivalent of the English Channel, the space between France and England, or in this case, the Crown Tundra and the Kalos region. It's called the Sea Spirit's Den, reflective of perhaps the nearby Max Raid dens. This is where a Lugia definitely once was. But we know that legendary Pokemon can roam and travel the Earth, none more so than the legendary birds that can fly anywhere they like pretty unrestricted. Ho-oh and Lugia, though, do have a roosting spot between Kanto and Johto, that on Naval Rock in the Sevi Islands, where they can both settle down. I do wonder though if Ho-oh is more connected with the Kanto region, actually even more so than Lugia. Perhaps after acquiring the legendary beasts, the legendary birds were given to Lugia to look after. This is because not only do we see Ho-oh flying across Kanto several times in the animated series, but if we are assuming that the Tower of Goldenrod in the west was Lugia's tower by the sea, then there was one on the same landmass in the far east. That would be Ho-oh's, the place of the rising sun. And sure enough, in the east of Kanto, there is actually a tower, but it's not one of the more traditional towers that you might think. It's the Pokemon Tower. And the Pokemon Tower is a very special place where spirits appear not as they should, not as ghost Pokemon do anywhere else across the Pokemon world. There's a healing circle set down in the middle of the building. And Ho-oh itself represents a phoenix, a Pokemon that rises from the dead. So I wonder if this tower was originally built as a tower to Ho-oh before Kanto and Johto separated, now only reunified by the presence of a modern-day Pokemon League between the two, the Indigo Plateau. If this is the case, then it's interesting to note that in the time of Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver, the Pokemon Tower of Lavender Town is actually gone, replaced with, oh, you guessed it, the Radio Tower. The Radio Towers are Kanto and Johto, one in the far east and one in the far west. There's all sorts of odd stuff to do with radio signals. Radio signals in Heart Gold and Soul Silver allow for the control and rampaging of Gyarados, and that's actually what forces the Magikarp to evolve early into Gyarados, creating the red Gyarados. Team Rocket want to use radio waves to summon back Giovanni, but the radio director says that actually just in them having access to the radio tower, people and Pokemon all across the land are in danger, suggesting that the radio director knows something that Team Rocket doesn't. We know that radio frequencies can tune into the sound of the unknown and the ruins of Alf. Perhaps the people working at these stations know something about the Pokemon world very deep. And in fact, the people who work at these stations is actually Silphco. Silphco, of course, have their hands in all sorts of Pokemon conspiracies and made the modern world version of the Pokeball that Kanto and Johto use, but they also have other technologies, like the Silph Scope, which they were likely using to scope out the Pokemon Tower before taking over and turning it into the Radio Tower, but also the Pokegear has the Silph Scope label slapped on top of it. The Pokegear is the very thing you use to tune into the radio. So it seems it's them, after all, that own these two radio towers. Perhaps they use the radio signals to manipulate the legendary birds to leave or come to the region, or perhaps they're trying to do something to do with the unknown, which we know are connected to Ho-oh, as we see the mural of Ho-oh in the ruins of Alf. Still, this is all dependent on the basis that Kanto and Johto were once one region, though I think that's probably pretty likely. Nonetheless, I find it absolutely fascinating that this one line of dialogue from the Johto games by the radio director sheds so much light and history on the world of the Johto region. For before there were the two towers of Ecruteak over 700 years ago, there were towers elsewhere in the region. Heck, maybe there was one up at the Lake of Rage before the Lake of Rage village got destroyed, but that is a whole other Pokemon theory. I want to say a huge thank you to Whatnot, who not only made this video, but actually a whole number of videos you're going to see on the channel here soon possible. I went traveling around Japan, and I got this video, of course, in Kyoto, which is the area that inspired Johto, and I took Pokemon cards with me for a photo shoot, but I also picked up exclusives there from the Japanese Pokemon Center, like the Pokemon Center in Kyoto, which has this gorgeous Pikachu in a kimono statue at the very heart of the Pokemon Center. If you click the link at the top of the description or scan the QR code on screen, you get £10 free credit added to your account when you sign up. You can use that credit on Pokemon cards that I will be selling on Whatnot every single Monday at 6 p.m. BST. I'm going to be live every single Monday for at least an hour with Japanese exclusives that I picked up while I was traveling around Japan, with some of the new sets like Obsidian Flames and 151, and with packs going for less than £10 if you sign up today. You're pretty much just getting yourself free packs of Pokemon cards from me. And of course, if I find any particularly cool Pokemon cards, I'll be sharing the lore of those cards with you. So click that link at the top of the description or scan the QR code on screen. Thank you so much to Whatnot for making this video possible, and much of my trip out to Japan. So hi, Pokemon Masters.
Hello there, it's me, Professor Oak. This video is over, so please choose another one wisely and quickly. Bye-bye.
Just the biggest thank you to those of you who are supporting this channel on Patreon, and a special thank you to the big patrons of the month, Jedruben, Charmander, Anzabal, Anthony Lee, The Elgator, and Michael Hornschuch. Thank you so much.